Australia is being warned that Chinese ships and aircraft will arrive in the Solomon Islands within 4 weeks after a security deal was signed between the two nations. It caused significant concerns within the government, and the opposition has called the Prime Minister out for not stepping in earlier. Joining me now is the Shadow Minister for Women and Education, Tanya Plibersek. Thanks so much for your time. First, can I ask you about the People's Forum last night? Do you think Anthony Albanese did enough?
Yeah, I think Anthony's gave a fantastic performance yesterday. He showed that he has got a plan for the nation, a plan for more secure jobs, a pay rise when you work hard, and real relief from cost of living pressures. It was a comprehensive win for Anthony.
Is Labor still suffering from policy positions gone in the past on border protection? Is this still seen as a Labor weakness? And did we see that last night?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Anthony's very clear that we support Operation Sovereign Borders. We support offshore processing, regional resettlement and boat turnbacks when it's safe to do so.
Well, Labor didn't support boat turnbacks in 2013. Do you support them now?
Yes, we do. And I think it's really a bit rich for Scott Morrison to be talking about 2013. In 2012, he was part of an opposition that voted against offshore processing in Malaysia. Not only did Scott Morrison vote against it, we had Joe Hockey crying in the Parliament saying that he couldn't bear the idea of sending asylum seekers to Malaysia. And they were very happy to vote against, I'm talking about the Liberals now and the Greens, vote against offshore processing in 2012.
Yeah, so the circumstances have changed. You know, there's really no policy difference between the government and Labor on this?
Well, certainly there are differences. Labor doesn't support temporary protection visas. We think people who've been here for more than a decade, started families, started businesses, probably don't need to be reprocessed every few years at, high expense to taxpayers. Of course, we continue to say that you can have strong borders while still being compassionate.
Is part of that compassion the Murugappan family? Under Labor, would they be allowed to go home to Billawheeler and be permanently resettled here?
Yes. Well, we've said very clearly that they should be able to go back to Billawheeler, the community that loves them, supports them, wants them there. The father has worked in the meatworks and as a forklift driver, two areas that the Australian economy more generally needs people working in, and certainly he's got a job waiting for him in Billawheeler. Of course, there are continued, legal processes that have to be gone through if you're talking about permanency, but there's no reason that the family shouldn't be in Billawheeler now. And I think the last estimate I saw of the cost of what the government's doing to this family was about $50 million. So it does really beg the question whether this is the best use of taxpayers' money. Yeah,
but we saw with one particular tennis player how much power a government minister has. If you were in government, you have that power, don't you, to make this situation better for that family, despite all the legal challenges still going on.
Yeah, I'm not going to speculate on what an immigration minister might do in terms of having that sort of discretion. But what I would say is that the Billawheeler community have made it really clear that this family is welcome there, they are supported, they've got jobs waiting for them, and the continued sort of legal limbo that this government has inflicted on this family, and the extraordinary cost to taxpayers of inflicting that legal limbo, I think is completely unacceptable. And we have said that the family should be back in Billawheeler now.
All right, let's talk about the Solomons deal. Anthony Albanese said that he would have sent Penny Wong. Do you really think sending Penny Wong would have changed the outcome?
I think showing that this national security threat on our doorstep is something that Australia takes very seriously, is something the government should have done. Julie Bishop has said that the current former minister, the current foreign minister should have gone to the Solomon Islands. And I certainly think it's extraordinary that, having been warned, as long ago as August last year, that this threat was emerging on our doorstep. The fact that government's done nothing, not sent any representation at that senior level, is a serious problem. Of course, this is a problem that is not just months in the making, it's a problem that's years in the making. When the government cut aid to the Pacific and cut aid to the Solomon Islands, we said at the time, Labor said at the time, if you cut aid funding that supports hospitals and schools and builds roads and infrastructure and supports democracy in our backyard across the Pacific, then we will leave a vacuum that others will seek to fill. That is absolutely what has happened here. Scott Morrison was warned, the Liberals were warned at the time. We also said, if we ignore our Pacific Island neighbours when they are telling us that climate change is an existential threat, they identify it as the most serious threat facing them. If we've got government ministers like Peter Dutton and Scott Morrison sitting around laughing at this existential threat, then that is a problem for our relationship.
But
this
isn't the
issue
problem
with the
that
Solomon
China
Islands
is
not
a much bigger emitter, much bigger polluter than Australia? So the Solomon Islands is getting their wires crossed somewhere.
And I think, Laura, we don't measure ourselves against China for what we want to do in the world, the kind of power
No, but the
that we want to
Solomons
be
is
in the
obviously
world.
measuring us against China.
Yes, because we left a vacuum. And this is, look, I'm not excusing China's behaviour here. China has become more assertive and more aggressive. We've seen what's happening in the South China Sea with the militarisation of islands and atolls and, you know, bits of rock in the South China Sea. We don't want that on our doorstep. We've now got a Chinese presence. Soon we expect a military presence about 1,600 kilometres off the coast of Australia. That's about as far, I think, as Sydney to Townsville, say. It's not far. And of course, China has changed. That means that our response, our national security response, has to adapt as well. Labor warned the government when they cut aid to the Pacific that we would reduce our influence, that others would seek to fill that vacuum. That has come to pass. This is not something that we can fix overnight because it's months and years in the making. So it will take time for us to restore those relationships. But I think someone of the calibre of Penny Wong as Foreign Minister is exactly the person to do that.
Let me finally ask you about comments made at the People's Forum last night. Scott Morrison basically said he and Jenny felt blessed that they hadn't had a disabled child because of the challenges that brings with it. Was that a fair comment or did it miss the mark?
Look, I think it was a very hurtful comment, and I understand why a lot of families who have been blessed with children who are different in some way would feel that it's hurtful. And I think it would be a good idea for the Prime Minister just to take responsibility and apologise for the comments.
Tanya Plibersek, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.